You know what's funny about First Contact? Nobody ever talks about the cleanup crew. Sure, you've got your dramatic arrival stories, your we come in peace declarations, your inevitable miscommunications leading to interstellar incidents. But what happens when the aliens just leave their stuff behind? Like cosmic litterbugs dropping a broken-down space jalopy in someone's backyard and vanishing into the night. That's exactly what happened to Earth in 2157, and frankly it was the best thing that ever happened to our species. Though I doubt the Zephyrian Collective saw it that way when we showed up at their doorstep 30 years later with their scrap metal transformed into something that made their entire fleet wet themselves in terror. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how humanity accidentally became the galaxy's most feared weapons manufacturers by doing what we do best, taking something broken and making it unreasonably dangerous. Chapter 1. Cosmic Fender Bender. It started, as most human success stories do, with someone else's catastrophic failure. The Zephyrian scout ship, harmonious contemplation of distant stars, because apparently aliens are even worse at naming things than we are, limped into Earth's solar system on what the crew probably thought was a routine survey mission. The kind of milk run where you scan for valuable resources, catalog any primitive life forms for the xenobiology department, and head home with enough data to justify your travel expenses. What they didn't count on was their hyperdrive deciding to have what engineers in any species would recognize as a spectacular malfunction. The kind that leaves you drifting through space with all the propulsion capacity of a particularly lazy asteroid. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenotechnician at the Lunar Research Station, was the first human to spot them on the deep space sensors. She'd been monitoring radio telescopes for signs of intelligent life for the better part of a decade. So when something the size of a city block suddenly appeared in Jupiter's orbit and started broadcasting what could only be described as alien profanity, she nearly choked on her coffee. "Hey Mitchell," she called across the lab to her research partner Dr. Trevor Mitchell, who was busy pretending to read technical journals while actually watching vintage Earth movies on his tablet. "You might want to see this." Mitchell wandered over, still holding a tablet displaying what looked suspiciously like the Fast and the Furious 37 Martian drift. "What's got you all excited? Did C finally pick up something more interesting than microwave background radiation?" Vasquez pointed at her screen where a massive sensor return was pulsing ominously near Jupiter. "That thing just appeared 15 minutes ago. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies and the translation algorithms are having a field day trying to decode it." Translation algorithms. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "It's actually language. Either that or we're witnessing the universe's most elaborate spam campaign." Vasquez pulled up the linguistic analysis software, which was currently displaying a confidence rating of 73% and climbing. "Listen to this." She played the audio feed. What emerged from the speaker sounded like a combination of whale song and someone trying to gargle with gravel. But underneath the alien cadence, there was definitely structure, pattern. Meaning by the eternal void's sweaty armpit, the computer's translation software announced in a cheerfully synthetic voice. "Why does this always happen when we're 3 sectors from the nearest maintenance depot?" Mitchell and Vasquez stared at each other for a long moment. Did that alien just swear?" Mitchell asked. "I think it did," Vasquez confirmed. "And apparently their profanity is surprisingly relatable." What followed was the most diplomatically awkward first contact in galactic history. The Zephyrian crew, led by someone whose name roughly translated to contemplates the void while drinking fermented grain beverages, or Captain Brewster, as the humans eventually nicknamed him, were polite, but clearly frustrated. Their ship was dead in the water, or rather dead in the vacuum, and they needed parts that simply didn't exist in this backwater solar system. After several days of increasingly desperate communications, they made humanity an offer that would change the course of galactic history. "Listen." Captain Brewster transmitted to Earth, his translation coming through with what could only be described as intergalactic resignation. "We're going to level with you primitive. I mean you fine bipedal beings. Our ship is basically scrap metal at this point. The hyperdrive core is cracked. The gravity generators are held together with hope and quantum prayers, and the waste recycling system has achieved sentience and filed for independence. We can't fix it with local materials, and our rescue ship won't arrive for approximately 47 of your planetary rotations. So here's what we're thinking. We'll trade you the ship for safe passage to the nearest civilized system when our people show up. Consider it a cultural exchange program." Dr. Vasquez, who had somehow become Earth's de facto alien ambassador by virtue of being the first person to answer the phone, transmitted back, "What exactly would we do with a broken starship?" The pause that followed was so long that Vasquez wondered if the translation software had crashed. "Honestly," came Brewster's reply, "we have no idea. Your species hasn't even figured out fusion power yet. Just don't hurt yourselves with it. Okay." The Galactic Council gets really pissy about primitive species accidentally vaporizing themselves with advanced technology. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how humanity acquired its first starship. Not through conquest, not through diplomatic negotiation, but because some alien space truckers basically abandoned their broken-down RV in our solar system, and asked us to not blow ourselves up with it. Spoiler alert, we definitely blew things up with it. Just not ourselves. Chapter 2. Human Engineering at its Finest. If you've ever watched a human mechanic work on a broken car, you've witnessed the fundamental principle that would eventually make us the most feared engineers in the galaxy. When something doesn't work, you hit it with progressively larger tools until it either starts working or becomes someone else's problem. The harmonious contemplation was towed to Earth's orbital shipyard 6 weeks after first contact, and the moment human engineers got their hands on it, the Zephyrian crew probably should have been more specific about that "don't hurt yourselves" warning. Dr. Rachel Stevens, head of the Terran Engineering Corps, took one look at the massive alien vessel and said what every human engineer has said when confronted with unfamiliar technology: "Well, it can't be that complicated." Famous last words. The ship itself was a marvel of Zephyrian engineering philosophy, which apparently consisted of make everything elegant, efficient, and completely impossible to repair unless you have a doctorate in quantum harmonics and access to materials that don't exist in this galaxy. It was sleek, beautiful, and about as user-friendly as a temperamental cat made of antimatter. "Okay," Stevens announced to her team of engineers standing in the ship's cavernous main bay. "What we have here is approximately 800 m of alien technology that operates on principles we don't understand, using materials we can't identify, powered by an energy source that defies half the laws of physics as we know them." She paused for dramatic effect, then grinned. "So basically, it's Tuesday. Who wants to start taking things apart?" What followed was 3 months of the most chaotic reverse engineering project in human history. The team approached the alien technology with the kind of methodical recklessness that had gotten humanity from horse-drawn carriages to orbital mechanics in barely 2 centuries. The hyperdrive was the first major discovery. The Zephyrians had built it around a crystalline matrix that channeled exotic matter through 11-dimensional fold space, which sounds impressive until you realize it had the structural integrity of a sugar sculpture in a thunderstorm. One minor resonance cascade and the whole thing would crack like an egg. "No wonder it broke," muttered Chief Engineer Carlos Mendes, squinting at the delicate crystal structure. "This thing is built like a Fabra egg. Pretty to look at, but you sneeze wrong, and it's a million pieces of very expensive debris." The human solution was elegantly barbaric. They reinforced the crystalline matrix with good old-fashioned titanium steel alloy, created a secondary containment field using modified fusion reactor technology, and basically turned the elegant Zephyrian hyperdrive into the equivalent of a muscle car engine. "It's not pretty," Mendes admitted, wiping grease off his hands as he surveyed their handiwork. "But it'll damn well get you where you're going, and you could probably drop it off a building without breaking it." The weapon systems presented an even more interesting challenge. The harmonious contemplation had been equipped with standard Zephyrian defensive arrays, elegant particle beam weapons that could precisely disable enemy systems without causing unnecessary damage. Very civilized, very restrained, very unhuman. Dr. Emily Cross, the team's weapons specialist, took one look at the alien beam arrays and immediately started calculating how to make them more destructive. "The problem with these systems," she explained to Stevens, "is that they're designed not to cause collateral damage. The beam disperses after impact to minimize secondary explosions. And that's a problem, because sometimes you want secondary explosions," Cross said with the kind of smile that would have made the Zephyrian crew very nervous. "Sometimes you want the other guy to know that you're not just shooting at him, you're shooting through him, and anything else that happens to be in the general vicinity." The human modifications to the weapon systems violated approximately 47 different galactic warfare conventions, most of which hadn't been written yet because no one had imagined that a species would look at a precision instrument and think, "You know what this needs? More boom." They rerouted power from the ship's climate control to boost the beam weapons output by 400%. They modified the targeting systems to lock onto multiple targets simultaneously. They added secondary explosive payloads that activated after impact. They basically turned a surgeon's scalpel into a thermonuclear chainsaw. Is it overkill? Stevens asked, reviewing the weapon's modifications. Probably, Cross admitted. But there's no such thing as overkill. There's only open fire and reload. The gravity generators received similar treatment. The Zephyrians had used them to create comfortable artificial gravity throughout the ship, a steady, reliable 1G that kept everyone's feet on the deck. Humans looked at that system and immediately started wondering what would happen if you cranked it up to 11. We could use this for acceleration compensation, suggested Dr. Alan Reeves, the team's physics specialist. Increase our maneuvering capacity by an order of magnitude. Or, said Mendes, with the kind of gleam in his eye that meant he'd had a terrible idea, we could weaponize it. What they built was essentially a gravity cannon, a system that could create localized gravitational fields of crushing intensity, capable of turning enemy ships into very dense, very flat pancakes. It was wildly impractical, completely over-engineered and absolutely terrifying. The Zephyrans are going to hate this, Stevens observed, watching the test results. Good, replied her entire team in unison. But the real masterpiece was what they did to the ship's communication array. The Zephyrians had designed it for elegant long-range telepathic communication across interstellar distances. Very zen, very harmonious, very much not designed to hack into every electronic system within a 50 light-year radius and download their entire digital infrastructure. It's not spying, insisted Dr. Patricia Wong, the team's computer specialist, as she finished installing what was essentially a galactic-scale surveillance system. It's aggressive information gathering. That's literally the definition of spying, Stevens pointed out. Only if we get caught. By the time the human engineers were finished, the harmonious contemplation bore about as much resemblance to its original design as a monster truck bears to a bicycle. They'd kept the hull in the basic frame, but everything else had been rebuilt according to human engineering principles. If it's not overbuilt, explosive and capable of violating several laws of physics, you're not trying hard enough. The Zephyrian rescue ship arrived 6 months later to find their former scout vessel transformed into something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of mad scientists with unlimited budgets and flexible ethical standards. Captain Brewster took one look at the heavily modified ship and transmitted a message that the translation software rendered as a series of symbols that were definitely not suitable for polite company. What, he finally managed, did you do to our ship? Stevens, who had been elected as humanity's spokesperson for this particular conversation, smiled pleasantly. We fixed it. Fixed it. That thing looks like it could crack a moon in half. Well, Stevens replied cheerfully. We did say we fixed it. We never said we wouldn't improve it while we were at it. What happened next would become known in galactic history as the incident that made everyone very nervous about humans. Chapter 3. The Galactic Council learns about human logic. The Galactic Council had been governing interstellar civilization for approximately 12,000 years with all the efficiency and decisiveness of a committee trying to choose a restaurant. They were very good at forming subcommittees, issuing strongly worded statements and holding emergency sessions to discuss the formation of additional subcommittees. What they were not good at was dealing with humans. Let me see if I understand this correctly, said High Counselor Vex 9. His tentacles writhing in what observers recognized as the Aquarian equivalent of a migraine. The humans were given a derelict Zephyrian scout ship as salvage, and they turned it into what exactly? Ambassador Brewster, who had somehow been promoted to cultural liaison for primitive species affairs after the harmonious contemplation incident, shifted uncomfortably in his bio seat. Well, Counselor, the technical specifications are rather complex. Simplify them. They turned our peaceful exploration vessel into a dreadnought that could probably level a small continent. The council chamber erupted in what could only be described as multilingual pandemonium. The crystalline hive representatives started humming ominously. The ethereal collective began phasing in and out of visible reality in distress. The mechanical forge minds simply started calculating the statistical probability of galactic war, and their results were not encouraging. This is impossible, declared Counselor Thrikon Commonwealth, his optical sensors focusing on Brewster with laser-like intensity. The humans lacked the technological base to comprehend our systems, let alone modify them. That's what we thought too. Brewster admitted. Turns out not understanding how something works doesn't actually stop humans from taking it apart and putting it back together. They just wing it. Wing it. It's a human expression. It means to proceed with confidence despite having no idea what you're doing. The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that occurs when several dozen advanced civilizations simultaneously realize they may have underestimated the new neighbors. High Counselor Vex 9 was the first to speak. Show us the technical specifications. What appeared on the chamber's holographic displays would have been amusing if it weren't so terrifying. The humans had essentially taken every elegant, efficient alien system and applied what could only be described as aggressive optimization. Where the original ship had graceful curves, the human modifications added angular armor plating. Where it had subtle energy signatures, it now broadcast its presence like a neon sign that read, "Will vaporize things for food." The power output readings alone are Counselor Thrick paused, running calculations. These numbers cannot be correct. They're correct, Brewster confirmed miserably. We checked twice. Then we had the computational guild verify our math and they confirmed it. The humans somehow increased the ship's total energy output by 600%. How? Near as we can tell, they rewrote everything. Life support, waste processing, even the coffee makers. If it generates power, they've connected it to the weapons grid. Counselor Nefal of the Greater Hydroid Consortium raised what might have been a hand if hydroids had hands. Surely their life support modifications render the ship uninhabitable. You'd think so, Brewster said. But apparently, humans are comfortable living in conditions that would kill most civilized species. They've reconfigured the atmospheric systems to run on emergency settings as a normal operating mode. And the crew doesn't object to this. The crew volunteered for it. Apparently, they consider it exciting. The council exchanged what could only be described as concerned looks, which was impressive considering that half of them didn't have faces. There's more, Brewster continued. Because apparently the day needed to get worse. They've requested permission to establish trade relationships with member civilizations. Trade relationships. High Counselor Vex 9's tentacles had gone completely still, which was never a good sign. What could they possibly offer us? Military consulting services. The holographic display shifted to show intercepted communications from Earth's various government and corporate entities. What the Council saw was a planet that had somehow managed to turn xenotechnology modification into a cottage industry. Every major human government has established alien technology research and development departments, Brewster explained. They're treating our technology like a puzzle to be solved. And they're very good at solving puzzles. The display showed human engineering teams working on captured Zephyrian technology, but also on devices that had clearly been acquired from other species. Aquarian biomputing systems had been integrated with human quantum processors. Ethereal energy manipulation technology had been combined with human power generation systems. Someone had apparently managed to reverse engineer forge mine manufacturing protocols, and was using them to mass-produce hybrid technologies. They're not just modifying alien technology, observed Counselor Thrick. They're combining technologies from multiple species. That should be impossible. They don't seem to understand the concept of impossible, Brewster replied. We've tried explaining it to them, but they just nod politely and then do it anyway. High Counselor Vex 9 was reviewing the technical specifications with the kind of focus that suggested he was either deeply impressed or planning an invasion. These modifications, they're not elegant, but they're effective. Crude, but functional. It's like they've taken a precision instrument and turned it into a sledgehammer. A very effective sledgehammer, Brewster corrected. Our war game simulations suggest that their modified vessel could engage and defeat ships 3 times its size. And they built this in 6 months working part-time. Apparently most of the engineering team had other projects they were working on simultaneously. The council chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just modified alien technology, they'd industrialized the process. They weren't treating galactic technology as sacred artifacts to be carefully studied and preserved. They were treating it like spare parts. What are they asking for in exchange for their consulting services? High Counselor Vex 9 asked, his voice carefully neutral. Brewster consulted his notes, though he clearly already knew the answer. Access to more alien technology to evaluate and improve. They've specifically requested examples of weapon systems, defensive technologies, and something they call anything that looks like it might explode in an interesting way.
They want us to give them our military technology so they can make it more dangerous. That appears to be the general idea. Yes. Counselor Neffel's bioluminescent patches were flashing in what anyone familiar with hydroid physiology would recognize as panic. This is how civilizations fall. This is how thousand-year-old empires become historical footnotes. Someone gives the barbarians access to advanced technology and suddenly they're knocking down your door. Technically, Brewster said carefully. They haven't knocked down anyone's door yet. Yet being the operative word, muttered Counselor Thrasel Vex 9 made what everyone recognized as an executive decision. Motion to table this discussion pending further investigation of human capabilities and intentions. All in favor. The vote was unanimous, which was remarkable considering that the Galactic Council had never unanimously agreed on anything, including what day of the week it was. Ambassador Brewster, the High Counselor, continued. You will return to the human system and conduct a more thorough evaluation of their technological capabilities. Report back in one standard galactic rotation. Understood, Counselor. Though I should mention they've invited me to something called a weapons demonstration next week. A weapons demonstration. They want to show off their modifications to the harmonious contemplation. Apparently they've made some additional improvements since we last saw it. Every member of the council who possessed the physiological capability to do so developed what humans would have recognized as a stress headache. Report back immediately after the demonstration, High Counselor Vex 9 ordered. And Ambassador, yes, Counselor, try not to give them any ideas. Chapter 4. The Demonstration. The Human Solar Defense Force had been established approximately 6 months after first contact, which was remarkably fast considering that most human governments usually took 6 months just to agree on what to call a new organization. But when you're sitting on what amounts to a functional starship capable of interstellar travel, bureaucratic efficiency tends to improve dramatically. Admiral Janet Sterling, formerly of the Earth Navy and currently the highest-ranking officer in humanity's first space-based military organization, stood on the bridge of the newly christened HSDF Unforeseen Consequences, and wondered if they were about to make a terrible mistake. All systems green, Admiral, reported Commander David Knox, the ship's chief engineering officer. The modifications are holding steady, and our guest observer is secured in the auxiliary bridge. Admiral Sterling glanced at the secondary display, which showed Ambassador Brewster strapped into what was essentially a reinforced crash couch designed to keep him alive during maneuvers that would turn most organic beings into paste. The Zephyran had insisted on observing the demonstration firsthand, despite multiple warnings about human safety standards.
Remind me again why we're doing this, Sterling asked. Because the Galactic Council wants to evaluate our capabilities, Knox replied. And because the engineering team was getting bored and started talking about building bigger guns. Ah yes, the traditional human response to having advanced technology make it more dangerous. The target for today's demonstration was a carefully selected asteroid in the outer system, approximately 2 kilometers in diameter, composed primarily of iron and nickel, and most importantly not near anything that anyone cared about. The plan was simple. Demonstrate the ship's various modifications in a controlled environment that would give the galactic community a clear understanding of human capabilities. The fact that several governments on Earth were secretly hoping this demonstration would serve as a subtle warning to any potentially hostile alien civilizations was entirely coincidental. Initiating first test sequence, announced Dr. Cross from the weapons control station. Standard particle beam configuration, minimum power setting. The original Zephyrian particle beam had been designed to disable enemy systems with surgical precision. The human-modified version approached the same problem with all the subtlety of a thermonuclear orchestra. The beam that lanced out from the unforeseen consequences struck the asteroid dead center and instead of carefully disabling theoretical enemy systems simply vaporized approximately a quarter of the target in a brilliant flash of superheated plasma. Host Dr. Cross observed clinically. Minimum power setting might be a bit high. Ambassador Brewster's horrified chittering came through the comm system with perfect clarity. That was minimum power, Sterling asked. Well, minimum safe power. We haven't actually tested the maximum setting yet because the computer simulations keep returning error messages that just say run away in 17 different languages. Noted. Next test. The gravity manipulation system was next on the demonstration schedule. Dr. Reeves had designed what he cheerfully called a localized gravitational adjustment field, which was scientific terminology for something that could crush enemy ships like aluminum cans. Activating gravity projector, Reeves announced. Target. Remaining asteroid fragments. What happened next was difficult to describe in terms that wouldn't make a physics professor weep. The scattered chunks of asteroids suddenly accelerated toward each other, as if someone had cranked up local gravity by a factor of several hundred. Metal shrieked, stone cracked, and in approximately 3 seconds what had been asteroid debris became a perfectly spherical ball of compressed matter, roughly the size of a basketball. Gravitational compression successful, Reeves reported cheerfully. We've created approximately 15 tons of ultra-dense matter. And what exactly are we supposed to do with 15 tons of ultra-dense matter? Sterling asked. Well, we could use it as ammunition for the kinetic weapon system. The kinetic weapon system was humanity's latest contribution to the art of making things go away permanently. It was elegantly simple. Take a small, very dense projectile and accelerate it to a significant percentage of the speed of light using modified hyperdrive technology. The result was a weapon that delivered more kinetic energy than most civilizations' primary military assets. Kinetic system ready, reported Lieutenant Torres from the tactical station, ultra-dense projectile loaded and targeted on Admiral. What exactly are we shooting at? Sterling consulted the tactical display. The asteroid was gone, obviously, having been compressed into a ball of ultra-dense matter and then fired at the nearest convenient target for demonstration purposes. What's the nearest large object that isn't important to anyone? There's a defunct communications satellite, about 30,000 kilometers out, No suggested. Been dead for 50 years, scheduled for cleanup anyway. Perfect. Target, acquired. Firing the kinetic projectile accelerated to roughly 12% of the speed of light covered the distance to the target in approximately 1 millisecond. The satellite, along with roughly a cubic kilometer of space around it, simply ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. What remained was a rapidly expanding cloud of plasma, and the kind of energy signature that made space traffic control computers throughout the solar system start frantically updating their hazard databases. Direct hit, Torres reported with the kind of professional calm that suggested she was either very good at her job or completely insane. Target. Eliminated. Also, we may have accidentally created a small artificial nebula. Ambassador Brewster's chittering had reached a pitch that the translation software was struggling to process. The closest approximation it could manage was a series of symbols that roughly translated to what the untranslatable concept is wrong with your species. Is our guest observer all right? Sterling asked. Define all right, Knox replied. Checking the biome monitors. His cardiovascular equivalent is elevated. His neural activity is spiking, and I think he's trying to achieve transcendence through pure terror. Should we stop the demonstration? Actually, Dr. Cross interjected. We haven't tested the hacking system yet. The communications array modifications were perhaps the most subtle of humanity's improvements to Zephyrian technology, which was saying something since subtle was not generally a word associated with human engineering. Dr. Wong had essentially turned the ship's communication system into a galactic-scale electronic warfare platform. Initiating communications test, Wong announced, scanning for available targets. The system immediately began identifying and cataloging every electronic device within range, which turned out to be significantly more than anyone had expected. The Zephyrian translation software indicated that their guest observer had personal communication devices, navigation equipment, and what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a smartphone. Found 17 different electronic systems on the observer's person, Wong reported cheerfully. Also detecting 43 automated beacons, 15 unmanned monitoring stations, and what appears to be an early warning system designed to alert the Galactic Council about unusual energy signatures. Can you access them? Already in. I've downloaded the complete contents of the observer's personal data storage, mapped the local sensor network, and I'm currently browsing what appears to be the Galactic Council's classified threat assessment database. Sterling paused. Should you be doing that? Probably not, Wong admitted. But their computer security is adorable. It's like they've never encountered anyone who didn't follow proper diplomatic protocols. What does the threat assessment say about us? Wong was quiet for a moment, scrolling through files. Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that we're currently classified as a minor technological anomaly with limited expansion potential. And the bad news, I'm currently updating the classification in real time based on this demonstration. We've gone from minor anomaly to significant concern to oh that's new, we're now listed as a potential existential threat to galactic stability. That escalated quickly. There's a priority alert going out to every major civilization in the local galactic cluster. Apparently our demonstration has triggered some kind of automated early warning system. Admiral Sterling considered their options. They could stop the demonstration now, try to downplay their capabilities, and hope the galactic community would forget about the time humanity turned a dead satellite into an artificial nebula. Or they could lean into it. Dr. Cross, she said finally. What's the estimated power output if we run all systems simultaneously? Cross consulted her displays, ran some calculations, and then double-checked her math. Theoretically, we could probably crack a small moon. Just theoretically. Well, we'd need a small moon to test it on. Sterling looked at the tactical display where several automated monitoring systems were frantically updating their threat assessments of human capabilities. Throughout the galaxy, early warning systems were alerting military commanders to the existence of a species that had somehow turned a broken scout ship into a weapon capable of ending civilizations. Ambassador Brewster, she said into the comm system, "How are you doing over there?" The chittering that came back was considerably calmer than before, though still tinged with what could only be described as existential dread. "Admiral, I believe I need to return to the Galactic Council immediately." "Of course. Anything else?" "Yes. When you inevitably receive contact from other galactic civilizations seeking military consulting services, I would like to formally request that the Zahirian Collective be placed at the top of your client list." Sterling exchanged glances with her crew. "Any particular reason?" "Because," Brewster replied with the weary tone of someone who had just realized that the galactic balance of power had shifted while he was watching. "I'd rather have you as allies than enemies." And that, as they say, was how humanity accidentally became the galaxy's most sought-after military contractors, simply by doing what humans do best. Taking something that worked perfectly well and making it unreasonably dangerous. The unforeseen consequences began receiving contract offers before it had even returned to Earth orbit. Chapter 5. The Business of War. 6 months after the demonstration that made the Galactic Council collectively soil themselves, humanity had somehow become the most popular military consultants in the known galaxy. This was particularly impressive considering that most of the galaxy's civilizations had never heard of humans before. The unforeseen consequences turned a dead satellite into a light show visible from 3 star systems away. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had gone from monitoring radio telescopes to running humanity's first interstellar consulting firm, stood in her new office aboard the orbital station aggressive negotiations, and wondered how her life had gotten so weird so quickly. "Ma'am," her assistant, Commander Patricia Lee, announced from the doorway. "The Crystalline Hive delegation is here for their consultation appointment. The ones who want us to improve their defensive grid. Those are the ones." They brought samples of their current technology and what they describe as an unlimited budget for necessary improvements. Vasquez nodded and made her way to Conference Room Alpha, which had been specifically designed to accommodate the various physiological requirements of galactic civilization. It had atmospheric controls, gravity adjustment fields, and a diplomatic immunity clause that had been necessary after the incident with the ethereal collective representatives. The Crystalline Hive delegation consisted of 3 beings that looked like someone had crossed a chandelier with a particularly aggressive spider. They communicated through harmonic resonance, which created a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane, but somehow managed to convey complex technical concepts with remarkable precision. "Greetings, Human Vasquez," chimed the lead delegate, who had introduced herself as Resonance of Distant Thunder. "We have reviewed your species' modifications to Zephyrian technology and wish to engage your services for defensive improvements. I appreciate your confidence in our abilities." Vasquez replied diplomatically. "What specific challenges are you facing?" The harmonic that followed was what the translation software interpreted as a sigh, which was disturbing because crystalline beings probably shouldn't be capable of sighing. "The Shadowed Fleet," Thunder replied. "They have been systematically raiding outer colonies for the past solar cycle. Our current defensive systems are inadequate." Vasquez consulted her briefing materials. The Shadowed Fleet was apparently a collection of pirates, raiders, and general unpleasantness that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim territories for decades. They specialized in hit-and-run attacks against poorly defended targets, and they were very good at disappearing before military forces could respond. "What's your current defensive setup?" she asked. Thunder's harmonic shifted to what sounded like embarrassment.
automated warning beacons, and strongly worded diplomatic protests. That's not much of a defense. Our civilization has been peaceful for over 3,000 years. We do not have experience with military applications. Dr. Rachel Stevens, who had been quietly reviewing the crystalline technology samples, looked up from her analysis. Your crystalline matrix technology is impressive. Very efficient energy transmission, excellent structural integrity. We could definitely work with this. What kind of improvements are you thinking? Vasquez asked. Stevens grinned, and Vasquez recognized the expression that meant the engineering team had had another terrible idea. Well, they've got perfect harmonic resonance throughout their entire technological base. We could weaponize that. Weaponize harmonic resonance. Think of it as a sonic weapon system, but instead of just sound, we're talking about weaponized reality harmonics. We could create resonance fields that disrupt enemy ship hulls at the molecular level. The crystalline hive delegates began humming in what the translation software tagged as excited terror. You wish to turn our communication systems into weapons? Thunder asked. Not just weapons, Stevens corrected. Area denial systems. Imagine a defensive grid that doesn't just shoot at attackers. It makes the entire region actively hostile to enemy technology. Their ships would start falling apart just by entering your space. Vasquez watched the delegates exchange harmonic patterns that probably constituted the crystalline equivalent of nervous whispering. What would this require? We'd need to modify your existing crystalline networks to operate on combat frequencies, Stevens explained, pulling up holographic displays of her proposed modifications. Instead of transmitting information, they'd transmit destructive interference patterns. Think of it as the difference between a concert and a sonic weapon. Thunder's harmonics shifted to what sounded like consideration mixed with the kind of excitement that comes from finally finding a solution to a long-standing problem. The power requirement's minimal. We'd be using your existing infrastructure just differently. Plus we could set up the system so that it only activates when hostile ships are detected. The rest of the time, it functions normally. And if the shadowed fleet attempts to raid our colonies, their ships will discover that our version of defensive grid means area where the laws of physics get really unfriendly really quickly, Stevens said cheerfully. The consultation continued for another 2 hours, during which the human engineering team proposed modifications that violated several fundamental principles of civilized warfare. By the time the crystalline hive delegation left, they had committed to a full defensive upgrade that would essentially turn their entire star system into a weapon. Think they'll actually go through with it? Lee asked as they watched the crystalline shuttle depart. They're being raided by pirates, and their current defense strategy is please stop. Vasquez replied. I think they're motivated. The next appointment was with representatives from the Silicon Commonwealth who had what they described as an engineering challenge that requires unconventional thinking. The Commonwealth delegates were mechanical beings, essentially sentient robots who had achieved consciousness sometime around the heat death of their original biological creators. They communicated through direct data transmission, which made conversations remarkably efficient, but occasionally overwhelming for organic beings. Human Vasquez transmitted the lead delegate, a sleek mechanical form designated Control Node Prime. We have analyzed your modifications to organic technology and wish to propose a collaborative project. What kind of project? The Forge minds have developed a computational virus that is systematically infecting our networks. Traditional countermeasures have proven ineffective. We require a solution that thinks differently. Dr. Wong, who had been listening from her position at the technical consultation station, immediately perked up. A computational virus. What are its attack vectors? It infiltrates through standard communication protocols, adapts to existing security systems, and systematically corrupts data integrity across systems, Control Node Prime explained. It appears to learn and evolve with each system it encounters. Basically, it's an AI that's really good at breaking other AIs, Wong summarized. How long has this been going on? 17 standard time units. We have lost contact with 14 colony networks and 37 deep space monitoring stations. Wong was already pulling up her analysis tools, the kind of focused intensity that meant she'd found an interesting problem to solve. Do you have any samples of the virus code? We have isolated instances in quarantine systems, but accessing them risks further infection. Perfect. I love a challenge. What followed was a technical consultation that would have been incomprehensible to anyone without advanced degrees in both computer science and xenotechnology. Wong and the Commonwealth delegates began exchanging data at rates that required specialized translation software just to keep up. The virus uses adaptive encryption, Wong observed, studying the data streams. It's not just smart, it's learning from every system it encounters. Traditional antivirus approaches won't work because it evolves faster than you can develop countermeasures. Correct. This is why we require unconventional thinking. Wong smiled, and Vasquez recognized another expression that meant the technical team had found a new way to break things. You know what this virus doesn't expect? Human chaos protocols. Chaos protocols. The virus is designed to infiltrate and corrupt organized logical systems. But what if we give it something that's already chaotic? Something that operates on principles that don't make sense even to the people who built it. Control Node Prime's optical sensors focused on Wong with laser-like intensity. Explain. We introduce human-designed code into your networks, not to fight the virus, but to confuse it. Create systems that operate on human logic, which is to say barely any logic at all. The virus will spend so much time trying to figure out how our code works that it won't have processing power left for actual attacks. You wish to defend our networks by making them illogical, beautifully, chaotically, magnificently illogical, Wong confirmed. We'll create subroutines that work perfectly despite violating basic programming principles. Security systems that should be terrible but somehow function better than they have any right to. The virus will basically have a nervous breakdown trying to process it. The Commonwealth delegates exchanged data bursts that the translation software couldn't quite parse. But Vasquez was pretty sure they were the mechanical equivalent of excited babbling. This approach has never been attempted. Control Node Prime finally transmitted. That's because most civilizations try to build logical, efficient systems, Wong replied. Humans build systems that work despite making no sense whatsoever. It's one of our greatest talents. By the end of the day, humanity had contracted to build a reality-disrupting defensive grid for the Crystalline Hive and a chaos-based cybersecurity system for the Silicon Commonwealth. The consultation requests were backing up faster than they could process them. Ma'am, Lee announced as the afternoon schedule wrapped up. We've received priority consultation requests from the Aquarian Collective, the Greater Hydroid Consortium, and something called the Benevolent Empire of Extremely Polite Conquest. What do they want? The Aquarians want us to weaponize their bioimputing networks. The Hydroids want us to design offensive capabilities for a species that reproduces by budding. And the Extremely Polite Empire wants us to make their conquest fleets more efficient. Vasquez rubbed her temples, feeling the onset of a headache that was becoming increasingly familiar. And the Galactic Council. They've requested an emergency session to discuss the human problem. The human problem. Apparently we've accidentally destabilized the galactic balance of power by being really good at making things more dangerous. Dr. Stevens looked up from her engineering station where she was reviewing technical specifications for 17 different alien weapon systems. Should we be concerned about that? Probably, Vasquez admitted. But first, let's finish building this reality-disrupting defensive grid. If we're going to be labeled as a galactic threat, we might as well earn it properly. Chapter 6. The Conference of Concerned Civilizations. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was held aboard the neutral station Diplomatic Immunity, which orbited a carefully selected star that belonged to no one, threatened no one, and was generally considered the most boring location in the galaxy. This made it perfect for high-stakes political negotiations, assuming you could keep everyone awake long enough to reach a consensus. High Counselor Vex 9 surveyed the assembled delegates with the kind of weary resignation that comes from spending 12,000 years trying to get multiple species to agree on anything. Today's agenda had a single item. What do we do about the humans? The situation has escalated beyond our initial projections, he announced to the chamber. In the 6 months since first contact, the human species has established military consulting relationships with 47 member civilizations, created weapon systems that violate 13 different warfare conventions, and somehow managed to turn galactic defense into a competitive industry. Ambassador Brewster, who had become the galaxy's foremost expert on human behavior through the simple expedient of surviving multiple encounters with them, stood to address the council. Counselors, I've prepared a comprehensive report on human capabilities and intentions. Summarize it. Vex 9 requested. They're really good at breaking things and making them more dangerous. They enjoy solving problems that most civilizations consider impossible, and they're completely unaware that they're terrifying the rest of us. The chamber erupted in the usual multilingual chaos. Counselor Thricon Commonwealth projected a holographic display showing the results of human modifications to Commonwealth cybersecurity systems. The humans introduced something they call chaos protocols into our networks, he announced. Our computational virus problem has been resolved, but now our systems operate on principles that our own engineers can't understand. Define can't understand, requested Counselor Nefal. The security subroutines work perfectly, but they shouldn't. They violate basic programming logic, ignore standard protocols and somehow achieve better performance than theoretically optimal systems. That's impossible. That's what we said. The humans nodded politely and then did it anyway. Representative Echo of distant stars from the crystalline hive chimed in with harmonics that translated to barely controlled excitement. The humans have transformed our entire home system into a defensive grid that makes approaching spacecraft uncomfortable. Define uncomfortable. Vex 9 requested, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. Ships attempting to enter our space without authorization experience what the humans call aggressive molecular restructuring. The Shadowed Fleet attempted a raid last week, and their ships are now very small, very dense objects orbiting our primary star. The humans assured us this was a non-lethal deterrent, though I'm not certain the crew members would agree. Counselor Youth Cole of the Ethereal Collective phased into visibility with what could only be described as cosmic indignation. The humans have offered to improve our phase shift technology by making it weaponized. They want to create what they call combat teleportation. Did you accept? We're considering it. Our preliminary analysis suggests their modifications would allow us to teleport bombs directly inside enemy vessels.
That's a war crime. Only if we get caught, Eighth Cole replied, echoing human logic with disturbing accuracy. High Counselor Vex 9 was developing what he was pretty sure was an ulcer, which was impressive considering that his species didn't technically have stomachs. Has anyone successfully said no to human modifications? The chamber fell silent. Anyone? More silence. What about the benevolent empire of extremely polite conquest? Emperor, courteous regards to your ancestors materialized via holographic projection, his image flickering with what appeared to be embarrassment. We initially requested assistance with improving our conquest efficiency while maintaining proper etiquette, and the humans suggested that we abandon politeness entirely in favor of what they call shock and awe. They've designed conquest protocols that complete planetary subjugation in hours rather than decades. You accepted this. We're field testing the new protocols on a volunteer planet next week. The humans assured us that rapid conquest is actually more humane than prolonged siege, and their logic was compelling. Vex 9 looked around the chamber, taking in the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Every single one of them had been somehow transformed by human influence. The peaceful species had become militarized. The military species had become more dangerous. Even the normally isolationist civilizations were requesting human consultations. Counselors, he said finally. We appear to be facing a fundamental shift in galactic balance. The humans have become a force multiplier for every civilization they encounter. Is this necessarily a bad thing? Asked Counselor Zed Prime of the Outer Rim territories. Our defensive capabilities have improved dramatically. Piracy is down 70% in sectors with human-modified security systems, because the pirates are afraid to operate there, pointed out Counselor Thrick. Exactly. Fear is an excellent deterrent. Representative Echo of Distant Stars chimed agreement. The Shadowed Fleet has ceased all raiding operations in crystalline space. They've reclassified our systems as existential hazards and recommend avoiding them entirely. What about the economic implications? Asked Counselor Nefal. The humans are charging considerable fees for their services. Ambassador Brewster consulted his notes. Actually, their pricing structure is unusual. They accept payment in the form of interesting technology to examine and materials that might explode in creative ways. They're not particularly interested in traditional economic compensation. They're working for spare parts and explosives. Essentially, yes. They seem to view each consultation as an opportunity to learn about new technologies they can modify. The implications of this were staggering. Humanity wasn't just offering military consulting services, They were building a comprehensive database of galactic technology while getting paid to do it. Every contract gave them access to new systems to study, modify, and potentially weaponize. What are their long-term intentions? Vex 9 asked. We've asked them directly, Brewster replied. Their response was, and I quote, "We're just happy to help. That's it." They seemed genuinely enthusiastic about solving engineering problems and making friends throughout the galaxy. They view their military consulting as a form of neighborhood watch program. Counselor Thrice additional data. Our analysis suggests that humans genuinely don't understand the implications of their modifications. They approach each project as an interesting technical challenge rather than a strategic military advantage. They're accidentally becoming the galaxy's dominant military power. It appears so. Yes. High Counselor Vex 9 considered their options. They could attempt to restrict human activities, but that would require enforcement mechanisms that didn't exist. They could try to limit human access to alien technology, but half the galaxy was already sending them consultation requests. They could declare humanity a threat to galactic stability, but that would probably just make them more popular with civilizations that felt threatened by their neighbors. Motion to propose a new classification for the human species, he announced finally. What classification? Asked Counselor Nefal. Benevolent existential threat. The chamber considered this benevolent because they're genuinely trying to help, Vex 9 explained. Existential threat because they're really good at it. The motion passed unanimously, which was becoming a disturbing trend in human-related council votes. What are the practical implications of this classification? Asked Counselor Thrick. We send them a strongly worded letter asking them to please continue doing exactly what they're doing, but maybe with slightly less enthusiasm. Ambassador Brewster raised what might have been a hand. Should I deliver this message? You're the expert on human psychology. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, more like a survivor. Vex 9 was about to respond when the chamber's communication systems activated with an incoming priority message from the human orbital station. Aggressive negotiations. Dr. Vasquez's image appeared on the main display, smiling with the kind of cheerful professionalism that had become associated with humanity's approach to galactic diplomacy. Greetings, esteemed members of the Galactic Council, she said warmly. I hope your emergency session is going well. I wanted to inform you that we've received your classification update and would like to thank you for the recognition. Uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. We've also received consultation requests from several council member species regarding defensive improvements, and we're happy to announce that we're offering a special discount for bulk orders. More silence. Additionally, our engineering team has been working on some exciting new projects that we think might interest the galactic community. We've successfully weaponized gravity, figured out how to hack reality using modified hyperdrive technology, and created what we're calling aggressive peacekeeping protocols for maintaining interstellar stability. Vex 9 found his voice. Dr. Vasquez, we're actually in the middle of discussing. Oh, one more thing. Vasquez interrupted cheerfully. We've detected some unusual energy signatures from outside the galactic rim. Long-range sensors suggest we might be looking at extragalactic contact within the next few months. Just thought you should know. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Did she just say? Counselor Thrick began. Extragalactic contact. Vex 9 confirmed wearily. Of course there's extragalactic contact because the galaxy wasn't complicated enough already. Ambassador Brewster stood up slowly. Counselors, I request permission to return to human space immediately. Why? Because if we're about to make contact with another galaxy, I want to be on the same side as the species that accidentally became our military-industrial complex. The motion to approve his request was predictably unanimous. Chapter 7. The Visitors from Beyond. 3 weeks after Dr. Vasquez's casual announcement about extragalactic contact, the first ships from the Andromeda Expeditionary Fleet arrived at the edge of the Milky Way, with all the diplomatic subtlety of a supernova. They weren't particularly interested in peaceful first contact. Admiral Sterling stood on the bridge of the HSDF Unforeseen Consequences, watching the tactical display as it updated with increasingly disturbing information about the approaching fleet. The ships were massive, each one easily twice the size of anything in the local galactic registry, and they were moving with the kind of purposeful determination that suggested they weren't here for a friendly visit. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, We're receiving transmissions from the approaching fleet. Translation software is struggling with the language patterns, but the general message seems to be, surrender immediately or face annihilation. Well, that's refreshingly direct, Sterling observed. Any word from the Galactic Council? Commander Knox consulted his displays. They've activated emergency protocols and are requesting immediate consultation on defensive options. Ambassador Brewster is en route aboard a priority transport. How long until the Andromedan fleet reaches inhabited systems? At current speed, approximately 18 hours. Sterling considered their options. The human fleet consisted of exactly one heavily modified Zephyrin scout ship and whatever vessels their various client species could contribute on short notice. The Andromedan expeditionary fleet appeared to consist of approximately 300 ships designed by people who had clearly never heard of proportional response. Dr. Cross, she said finally, what's our combat readiness status? Cross looked up from her weapons control station where she had been making the kind of modifications that usually preceded explosions. All systems are operational and optimized for maximum mayhem. We've also received some interesting new technology from our consulting contracts that might level the playing field, such as the Crystalline Hive shared their harmonic resonance weapons. The Silicon Commonwealth provided us with Chaos Protocol computing systems, and the Ethereal Collective gave us some very interesting phase shift technology. And you've integrated all of this into our existing systems. Obviously, we've also made some improvements. Admiral Sterling was learning to be wary of that particular phrase. What kind of improvements? Well, we've combined the harmonic resonance system with our kinetic weapons to create what we're calling reality disruption munitions. Instead of just hitting targets really hard, our projectiles now destabilize local spacetime on impact. Is that safe? Define safe. Cross replied cheerfully. The computer simulation suggests that each hit will create a localized area where the laws of physics get flexible. Flexible? How? Things might start moving backward in time. Gravity might reverse direction, and there's a small chance we could accidentally create pocket dimensions. But the good news is that this will be very confusing for anyone trying to shoot back at us. Before Sterling could respond to this casual announcement of weaponized causality violation, the bridge's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from the approaching Andromedan fleet. The image that appeared on the main screen was unsettling. The being addressing them appeared to be constructed from what looked like crystallized shadow and geometric impossibilities. When it spoke, the translation software produced text that seemed to shift and change even as it was being displayed. Primitive inhabitants of this galaxy, the entity announced in a voice that suggested it was used to being obeyed immediately and without question. I am Herald of Inevitable Convergence, representative of the Andromedan Collective. You will cease all defensive preparations and prepare for integration into our sphere of influence. Integration, Sterling replied, activating the ship's communication system. Could you be more specific about what that involves? The Herald's form shifted in what might have been surprise. You dare to question the collective's intentions. Your species has been classified as suitable for resource extraction and population management. Resistance will be met with total annihilation. Resource extraction and population management, Sterling repeated slowly. You're here to strip mine our galaxy and enslave the inhabitants. Correct. Your compliance will ensure minimal collateral damage. Sterling looked around the bridge, taking in the expressions of her crew. They ranged from professional concern to barely controlled rage, with a few examples of the kind of grim determination that usually preceded humans doing something spectacularly dangerous. Herald, she said finally. I appreciate your directness, but I'm afraid we're going to have to decline your offer. The pause that followed was pregnant with the kind of menace that suggested the Herald was not used to being told no. Your refusal is irrelevant, it finally replied. The collective has conquered 17 galaxies. Your primitive technology cannot oppose our forces. Primitive technology. Dr. Cross interjected from her station, her voice carrying the kind of dangerous cheerfulness that meant she was about to do something inadvisable. Admiral, permission to demonstrate our capabilities. Sterling considered this. They were facing overwhelming odds against an enemy that had conquered 17 galaxies and showed no interest in peaceful coexistence. Conventional military wisdom suggested surrender or retreat. On the other hand, conventional military wisdom hadn't taken human engineering into account. Permission granted.
Target the nearest enemy vessel. Which weapon system? Surprise me. What Dr. Cross fired at the approaching Andromedan fleet would later be classified by galactic historians as the shot that changed everything. It was a single kinetic projectile enhanced with harmonic resonance fields, chaos protocol guidance systems, and what the engineering team had cheerfully labeled aggressive space-time modification protocols. The projectile struck the lead Andromedan vessel, and instead of simply destroying it, created what could only be described as a localized reality crisis. The ship didn't explode so much as it underwent an existential breakdown. Parts of it began moving backward through time while other sections phased into parallel dimensions. The crew's distress signals were being transmitted in languages that wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. The Herald's image flickered as what Sterling assumed was shock propagated through the Andromedan communication system.
What?
The Herald finally managed. Did you just do to our vessel? We shot it, Sterling replied matter-of-factly. Did you not expect us to shoot back? Your primitive kinetic weapons cannot. That is impossible. Our ships are protected by quantum barriers that deflect all conventional attacks. Well, there's your problem right there, Dr. Cross called out from her station. You're protected against conventional attacks. We don't really do conventional. The tactical display updated to show the Andromedan fleet response to this demonstration. Instead of pressing their attack, they had stopped dead in space and were apparently conducting urgent tactical reassessments. Herald, Sterling continued. I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to be operating under the assumption that this galaxy contains primitive species with primitive technology. That's not entirely accurate. Explain. We're definitely primitive, Sterling admitted. But our technology, well, primitive might not be the right word. Chaotic might be more accurate. Unpredictable is probably closer. Willing to violate fundamental laws of physics for tactical advantage is probably the most accurate description. Ambassador Brewster's shuttle docked with the unforeseen consequences in the middle of this conversation, and the Zephyrian diplomat arrived on the bridge just in time to hear Sterling explaining human military philosophy to an extragalactic invasion force. Admiral, Brewster said carefully, please tell me you're not about to start an intergalactic war. I don't think we're starting it, Sterling replied. I think we're finishing it. The Herald's image had stabilized, but the entity's form was displaying what could only be described as visible confusion. You claim to possess weapons that can violate physical law. We don't claim anything, Dr. Cross interjected. We just demonstrated it. Your ship is currently experiencing temporal displacement, dimensional phasing, and what our computers are calling aggressive geometric reorganization. Would you like us to do it again? The tactical display showed increasing activity within the Andromedan fleet. Ships were repositioning, energy signatures were spiking, and what appeared to be urgent communications were being exchanged throughout their formation. The collective has never encountered resistance capable of. The Herald paused, apparently searching for appropriate terminology. Your weapons appear to function on principles that should not exist. That's the most accurate description of human technology I've ever heard, Brewster murmured. Sterling activated the general communication system, broadcasting to the entire Andromedan fleet. Attention, Andromedan Expeditionary Force. This is Admiral Janet Sterling of the Human Solar Defense Force, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Alliance. You have attempted to invade our galaxy with the stated intention of enslaving the inhabitants and strip mining our worlds. This is unacceptable. She paused, letting the translation software catch up. You have two options. You can turn around and return to whatever hellscape spawned you, or you can continue your invasion attempt and discover exactly what happens when you threaten a galaxy that's been getting military consulting services from humans for the past year. You threaten the collective with a single vessel. I'm not threatening you with a single vessel, Sterling replied cheerfully. I'm threatening you with an entire galaxy full of species that have been learning human military engineering techniques. The shot we just fired, that was our basic defensive munition. We've been experimenting with much more interesting weapons. The communication system activated with incoming transmissions from throughout the local galactic cluster. The crystalline hive was reporting full defensive grid activation. The Silicon Commonwealth was deploying Chaos Protocol electronic warfare systems. The Ethereal Collective was initiating combat teleportation protocols. Even the benevolent empire of extremely polite conquest was mobilizing what they now called their Rapid Pacification Fleet. Harold Sterling continued. You've made a fundamental tactical error. You assumed you were invading a galaxy full of primitive species with primitive technology. What you've actually done is picked a fight with a galaxy full of species that have been taking lessons from humans on how to make things more dangerous. The Herald's form was now displaying what could only be described as visible distress. The collective's tactical assessment indicated minimal resistance capability. Your tactical assessment is about a year out of date, Ambassador Brewster informed them. We've had some significant technological developments recently. What happened next would become known in galactic history as the 5-Minute War. The Andromedan Expeditionary Fleet, faced with weapons that violated their understanding of physics and tactical doctrine that made no sense from any civilized perspective, made the entirely reasonable decision to retreat back to their home galaxy as quickly as possible. This cannot be the end of this matter, the Herald transmitted as the Andromedan fleet began accelerating toward the galactic rim. The collective will return with greater forces. Feel free, Sterling replied. We'll be here and will probably have developed even more interesting weapons by then. As the Andromedan fleet disappeared into the vast emptiness between galaxies, Admiral Sterling looked around at her crew and realized that humanity had just accidentally become the galaxy's defense force simply by being really good at making things explode in creative ways. Ma'am, Lieutenant Torres reported. We're receiving congratulatory messages from 43 different civilizations and consultation requests from 12 species that want to upgrade their military capabilities before the Andromedans come back. Of course they do. Sterling sighed. Dr. Cross, start working on those much more interesting weapons I mentioned. I have a feeling we're going to need them. Epilogue. The New Galactic Order. 6 months after the 5-Minute War, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later describe as the age of human engineering solutions. This was a diplomatic way of saying that every major civilization had either hired human military consultants, or was desperately trying to figure out how to compete with civilizations that had hired human military consultants. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now holding the impressive title of Director of Interstellar Strategic Consulting and Applied Chaos Theory, stood in her expanded office aboard the massive orbital station aggressive negotiations to and reviewed the latest consultation requests. The original station had been expanded 3 times to accommodate the increasing demand for human engineering services. Ma'am, Commander Lee announced from the doorway. The quarterly status reports are ready for your review. Vasquez accepted the datapad and scrolled through the highlights. In the past 6 months, human consulting teams had established permanent offices in 47 star systems, created defensive technologies that had eliminated piracy in the Outer Rim territories, and developed weapons systems that had convinced 3 different species to abandon their traditional warmongering in favor of peaceful coexistence with the scary humans. Any word from the Galactic Council about our expanded operations? She asked. They've officially classified humanity as a stabilizing force for galactic security and requested that we establish a permanent embassy on the Council station. And unofficially, High Counselor Vex 9 sent a personal message saying, and I quote, "Please continue doing whatever it is you're doing because the galaxy has never been this peaceful, and we're all too terrified to ask how you're managing it." Vasquez chuckled and continued reviewing the reports. The numbers were genuinely impressive. Interstellar conflicts were down 60%. Piracy had virtually disappeared. Even the traditionally aggressive civilizations were finding it more profitable to hire human consultants than to maintain expensive military fleets. What about the Andromedan situation? Long-range sensors indicate that their home galaxy has gone completely dark, Lee reported. No communications, no ship movements, no energy signatures. It's like they've decided to pretend we don't exist. Probably a wise decision on their part. The office communications system activated with an incoming priority transmission from Admiral Sterling aboard the Unforeseen Consequences, which was currently on patrol near the galactic rim. Dr. Vasquez. Sterling's image appeared on the main display. We've got an interesting development. Long-range sensors are detecting another extragalactic fleet approaching from the direction of the Large Magellanic Cloud. Another invasion force. That's what we thought initially. But their approach vector and communication attempts suggest they're actually here for peaceful contact. Their transmissions are being translated as requests for military consulting services and defensive technology procurement. Vasquez exchanged glances with Commander Lee. They've heard about our work. Apparently, news of the 5-minute war has spread to neighboring galaxies. We're starting to receive consultation requests from civilizations we've never heard of. How many requests? 17 different galaxies so far. The demand for human military consulting appears to be expanding beyond our local galactic cluster. Vasquez considered the implications. Humanity had accidentally become the galaxy's premier military contractors by doing what they did best, taking things apart and putting them back together in ways that violated several laws of physics. Now apparently they were about to become the universe's premier military contractors. Admiral, what's your assessment of our capability to handle intergalactic consulting contracts? Well, Sterling replied with the kind of grin that meant she'd been talking to the engineering team. Dr. Cross has been working on some new weapon systems that she claims can restructure reality on a galactic scale. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but the computer simulations are either very impressive or completely terrifying. Probably both, Vasquez observed. Set up a meeting with the approaching fleet. Let's see what they want. Already done. They'll be here next week. Oh, and Dr. Vasquez. Yes, they're offering to pay us in something called quantum crystallized dark matter and technologies that predate the current universe. The engineering team is very excited. After the transmission ended, Vasquez stood at her office's observation deck and looked out at the bustling traffic around the orbital station. Ships from dozens of different civilizations were arriving and departing on a constant basis, bringing consultation requests, payment for services rendered, and new technologies for the human engineering teams to examine and inevitably improve. Ma'am, Lee said carefully, do you think we're in over our heads? Vasquez considered this. 6 months ago she had been monitoring radio telescopes for signs of intelligent life. Now she was running an interstellar consulting firm that had accidentally become the galaxy's military-industrial complex, and was apparently expanding into intergalactic operations. Probably, she admitted. But we're humans. Being in over our heads is basically our natural state. We'll figure it out as we go. And if we can't, then we'll do what humans always do when faced with impossible problems. We'll break something, fix it incorrectly, and somehow end up with a solution that works better than anyone expected. Commander Lee nodded, apparently finding this logic reassuring. Should I schedule a meeting with the engineering team to discuss expanding our capabilities for intergalactic operations? Absolutely. And Lee, yes ma'am. Make sure Dr. B. Cross understands that restructuring reality on a galactic scale probably counts as overkill for most consultation requests. I'll mention that, but I don't think she'll listen. Probably not, Vasquez agreed. But that's what makes us human. As she watched another ship arrive at the docking bay, this one apparently from a civilization that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, Dr. Vasquez reflected on humanity's remarkable journey from primitive radio telescope operators to the universe's most sought-after military consultants. It had all started with aliens abandoning a broken starship in their solar system because they couldn't be bothered to fix it properly. Now, less than 2 years later, humanity had somehow become the go-to solution for every military problem in the known universe. The truly remarkable thing wasn't that humans had figured out how to weaponize alien technology. Any species with sufficient determination could probably manage that. The remarkable thing was that they'd done it while genuinely trying to help people, maintained a cheerful attitude throughout the process, and somehow convinced the entire galaxy that having humans as allies was preferable to having humans as enemies. Ma'am, Lee announced, consulting her datapad. We've just received a consultation request from something called the Transcendent Collective of Post-Physical Entities. What do post-physical entities need with military consulting? Apparently they're having a territorial dispute with some malevolent interdimensional parasites, and would like us to design weapons that can kill things that don't technically exist. Vasquez sighed and made another note on her ever-expanding to-do list. Schedule them for next month. And Lee, yes ma'am. Put together a recruitment package for more engineers. I have a feeling we're going to need them. How many more engineers? All of them. We're going to need all the engineers. As Commander Lee hurried off to begin what would undoubtedly be the largest technical recruitment drive in galactic history, Dr. Vasquez returned to her desk and began reviewing the latest project proposals from the human engineering teams. There was a plan to weaponize mathematics itself, submitted by Dr. Wong with a note saying, "It's probably overkill, but the equations are really elegant." Cross had proposed creating what she called a universal peace enforcement system that would make aggressive behavior physically impossible throughout the galaxy. Dr. Stevens wanted to build a device that could aggressively reorganize reality for optimal defensive configurations. Normal civilizations would have looked at proposals like these and concluded that their engineers had gone insane. Humans looked at them and started calculating resource requirements and implementation timelines. The universe, Vasquez murmured to herself as she approved funding for all 3 projects, has no idea what it's gotten itself into. Through her office window she could see the distant gleam of approaching ships from 17 different galaxies, all seeking human military consulting services. The communications array was processing requests for weapons that could destroy concepts, defensive systems that operated by making attackers forget why they'd wanted to attack in the first place, and something called aggressive diplomatic solutions for preemptive peace enforcement. Humanity had set out to explore the universe and find their place among the stars. Instead, they'd accidentally become the universe's military-industrial complex by applying human engineering principles to alien technology. When something doesn't work properly, you take it apart, figure out why it's broken, fix it, and then make it better than it was before. The fact that better in human terms usually meant more dangerous was just a happy coincidence. Dr. Vasquez opened her desk drawer and pulled out the framed photograph that had started it all.
The first image of the harmonious contemplation of distant stars limping into Earth's solar system with its broken hyperdrive and frustrated crew. At the time, first contact with alien life had seemed like the most important moment in human history. Now, looking back, she realized that the most important moment had been when Captain Brewster had made the casual decision to abandon his broken ship rather than try to fix it. Because if there was one thing humans were really good at, it was taking someone else's broken technology and turning it into something unreasonably dangerous. And the universe apparently couldn't get enough of it. The end.